So welcome everybody to ActiveRain University. Today we're going to talk about how we be found, or how we get found, how you be found. That's kind of a weird little deal. We're going to talk about how to get your blog to rank on the first page of Google. And again, my name is Bob Stewart. I'm the community evangelist here at ActiveRain. And at this point, I always like to kind of put this out there. I'm not a search engine expert. Okay, I would never call you up and try to sell you some package that's going to guarantee that your website ranks on the first page of the search engines. The stuff that I'm going to talk about today is going to be things that we've learned over 10 years of getting websites to rank in the search engines, and there's not a manual for this stuff. Okay, Google doesn't send me something special that they didn't send to you guys. They don't, I don't have somebody at Google I can call up and say, oh, this changed, how does that impact things? This is just stuff we've learned over 10 years, and I have a unique position to be able to sit here at ActiveRain and look at the blogging behavior of a lot of folks and really try to figure out what are the things that people are doing that work, and then what are the things that maybe you want to try to avoid. So you are here today because you're all here for different reasons, but the primary purpose why I hope you realize you're here is that blogging is a long-term plan to get yourself exposed online, to get your business exposed online. And especially, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with like some of the recent changes that happened to Craigslist where they eliminated the links, and you got people out there scrambling who are generating a lot of leads and traffic to their website because of something like Craigslist, and all of a sudden they change the rules on you. Now, Google's not immune to changing the rules, right? They'll do this for us, but our blog and creating good content in our blog and doing kind of the right things when we create that content can create a long-term strategy for us to not only help not only get our blog content ranking, but also just to get our website ranking a little bit better in the search engine. So this first class, we're going to talk about the things we want to do inside one blog post in order to get it to rank on the first page of the search engines. And then the entirety of this class, all 4 weeks of it, by the end, we'll basically have a good idea of how do we go about creating content in a fashion that helps us generate traffic and leads for our real estate business. So that's why you're here. Let's talk about the foundations of search engine optimization, or SEO, kind of at a 30,000-foot level, right, at a really high level. And the gentleman who created this little pyramid here, he is an SEO expert. So it used to be called SEO Moz. It's now just called Moz. But SEO Moz is a community of search engine experts, just like ActiveRain is a community of real estate professionals. And Rand Fishkin is the founder of SEO Moz, and this is what he said is kind of the foundations of SEO. And at the bottom, which is essentially what we're going to be talking about today, is content quality and accessibility. So creating good content, but doing it in a fashion that the search engines like, or that they're accustomed to, or that they're telling us is kind of what they expect from a good piece of content. Next week's class, we'll talk about keyword targeting and research. So how do we figure out like what people are actually writing about and what things we want to apply what we learned today toward writing. And actually in the fourth class, we'll talk about link building and calls to action and some of the things that we can do to generate leads and to potentially help our own websites rank better. I'll touch on a little bit of that today. And then social is actually class 3, so they're a little bit out of order here in terms of the pyramid, but we're going to cover each one of these different things throughout our classes over the next couple of weeks. So there's a concept that I want to make sure everybody understands, and really what this concept allows you to understand is how are you going to beat the Trulias and the Zillows and the Realtor.coms, because in any of our given marketplaces, if you were to go in there and type in homes for sale in, like, Chandler, Arizona happens to be what's on the screen, but I'm in San Jose, so homes for sale in San Jose, or Seattle real estate, or Seattle houses for sale, really any of those kind of generic, more, in this case they call them short tail, but any of those more generic terms, the folks that are going to come up are Trulia, Realtor.com, and Zillow, and the reason is they've got millions of pages and literally millions of dollars that they spend on getting themselves to rank for those sorts of terms. But we have a chance to beat them and at least compete with them if we understand this concept of the long tail. And what the long tail says, and you can kind of see it explained a little bit on the screen, but I'd like to share with you the idea of the long tail as it relates to Amazon and how Amazon became the #1 bookseller in the world, but let's just say in the United States. So when they first started out, what Amazon understood was in the book market, in any given year, there are about 50 books that make up 30% of the sales of all the books. And there's millions of books that somebody could potentially buy today. But back when Amazon started, those 50 books made up 30% of the sales, and then all the rest of the books made up the other 70% of the sales. But you couldn't find many of those other kind of rest of the world books, the other 99.9% of the books, by walking into a Border Book or a Barnes & Noble, because it didn't make sense for Barnes & Noble to stock that book that only sold 15 times all year, or that book that only sold 30 times all year, or that book that only sold 12 times all year. But the cumulative of all those other books, right, not the top 50 sellers, the cumulative of all those other books made up 70% of the book sales. And Amazon understood that, and they were able to stock those books because they didn't have to physically stock them in order to become the #1 bookseller in the world. So wait, what? Like, how does this relate? Okay, so in search, what happens is in any one of your markets, there are going to be about 6 to 8 terms that make up that 30%, that high volume, right? It's just a couple of terms that make up a term like homes for sale in Seattle. That's getting searched for 100,000 times a month, right? A lot. A term like Seattle real estate is getting searched for a lot. But those top 6 or 8 terms only make up 30% of the search volume. The other literally 99.9% of the ways that somebody could search for something in your market, where no one of those ways is searched for very often. And so we see it on this graph here, something like, cheap short sale homes for sale in Chandler, Arizona. That's not going to get searched for that often. But the cumulative of all of those other searches makes up a lot of the traffic. Okay? Something else that happens on this long tail is as people get more specific with the way that they search, they're actually closer to doing something. The conversion rate is higher on somebody looking for a cheap short sale home for sale in Chandler versus somebody that's just searching Arizona real estate. Okay? The person searching condos for sale in Seattle, probably not as close to doing something as the person that's maybe searching for like condos for sale in Plaza del Sol, which is the name of a specific building, right? That search is not done as often, but the person doing that search is much closer to actually buying something, and we're able to compete with Trulia and Zillow and the Realtor.coms out on this long tail. So we'll bring this to life definitely over the course of this class, and we'll continue to bring this concept to life in subsequent classes in this series as well. So if I was in front of you guys, I'd ask you how many of you guys are familiar with the long tail. I would say half of you guys would raise your hand and say, yeah, I get it. But it's really important as you kind of dive into the kind of things that I'm going to cover in my blog, and how am I going to be able to compete with the Trulias and the Zillows and the Realtor.coms. Okay, so this is a key important first step for getting your content to rank in the search engines, and it's called Google authorship. And we will see this in action today when we go live towards the end of the class, and I show you some actual examples written by a real person on ActiveRain. Google authorship is the thing that allows your picture to show up in a Google search result. And if you guys have been Googling like I have for years, you'll know that Google doesn't make too many changes to the display of the results on their search results page. But one of the changes they've made, and it's not really recently anymore, that this has been in effect for at least the last about 2 years, is the ability for us to tell Google the content that we created. And it happens through a thing called Google authorship. And in order to set your Google authorship up for your ActiveRain account, you can go to that link right there. And Carrie's going to send that link out to you right now. This link is also going to be a part of your homework or your action items that we give you at the end of the class. But this is an ultra important first step of getting your content to rank in the search engines. And there's 2 reasons behind this, why it's important. The first reason is it puts your image or your picture, like we see here, into the Google search results. And what Google has started to tell us is that search results that have a picture in them are getting click-through rates at a higher percentage than they would in the same position without the image. So if this result was the third result on the page, it's getting clicked through at a higher rate than it would be if it was the third result without the image. Okay, so that's the first reason why we'd want to get it set up. The second reason is as we start to create content, so we have a ton of brand new bloggers on here. As you start to create content, having Google authorship set up will show Google the content that you're creating, and will start to give them an understanding of who you are as an author. And what that does is, so Barbara Altieri here, she's an agent in Shelton, Connecticut. Now, this one post about this particular condo building is not the only post that Barbara's written, right? She's going to continue to write and continue to create content about Shelton, Connecticut. So she's writing about the condo complexes. She's writing market reports. She's writing about local events. She's writing about local businesses. She's writing about the subdivisions that are in the area. She's writing about all these things that are specific to Shelton. And so what Google does is as they continue to see her being an author of content about a specific thing or a specific area, they will start to, like a rising tide, they will bring all of her content up in the search results based on the cumulative effort of her content. So it's no longer just like we put one piece of content out there and it ranks and we're done and we sit on our hands. Google's looking at you as an author and the entirety of the content you create. So a super important first step, and guys, this takes you, maybe 5 minutes. We have a tutorial on there. It's got pictures. It's got a little video. It walks you through step by step how to set up Google authorship. It's absolutely essential today to make sure that we're able to get our content to rank. And then once it is ranking, it's essential to make sure that we have Google authorship set up so that we can get higher click-through rates. Can you still get a piece of content to rank without having Google authorship set up? Yes, you can. Will it rank as well? And will it get as high of a click-through rate? No, it won't. So you need to get Google authorship set up. Very important first step. Okay, so now let's get in and talk about when we're actually writing a post now. What are some of the things that we need to make sure we're doing in order to get that post to rank on the search engine? So I've got them all lined out here, 300 to 700 words, pick a keyword phrase for your title, repeat your title to start and the end of the content, and use your keyword phrase 3 to 5 times. We're going to go through each one of these things individually. So 300 to 700 words, look, these are not hard and fast rules. And in fact, anybody that would tell you, oh, this is an absolute, if you do this, you're not going to, or if you don't do this, you are going to, that's just not the way it works with Google, okay? We see these kind of outlier situations, and we're just trying to give you best practices, but from the perspective of how long should my content be or how much should I be writing, 300 to 700 words is kind of a sweet spot. Look, here's the reality. You can get a post to rank that's 100 words, 150 words. But you always serve two masters when we're talking about Google. And one is Google itself, right? And can we get the content to rank? But the other one, and maybe even more important, is real people are going to find this content. They're going to do Google searches that bring you up as a result. And when they click on your result, you need to be, that piece of content needs to convince them that you were an expert in the thing that they queried on Google. Okay, if you wrote 150 words, the person clicks on it, they land there, they see it, and they go, oh, there's barely anything here, and they bounce back because you're not able to demonstrate that you're an expert. That's doing two things. First, you lost that consumer, right? Because you decided you didn't want to prove to them you were an expert with your piece of content, but it also shows Google, hey, look, you served this result up. The consumer who found it didn't necessarily like it because they left pretty quick. They're probably not going to serve you up later in a similar position. So 300 to 700 words, but look, if you write something that's 800 words, is that not going to rank? Of course not. Okay? And in fact, with some of the more recent updates that Google's been making, they're getting so much closer to actually being like a real person reading these things that in some ways, the deeper you dive, the better, meaning the more robust the piece of content you create, the better. Okay, but again, it all comes back to like when a real person lands on that piece of content and they read it, is it fulfilling the query that they gave to Google, right? If they're interested in, a certain condo complex, like are you giving them the really good information about that condo complex that maybe they can't even find anywhere else? That's a type or a piece of content that somebody's going to stay on right after Google served it up. The person finds it. They're going to read it. It's going to take them 3 to 5 minutes to read it, or 2.5 minutes, and that's going to be a signal to the search engine that, look, there was a good piece of content, or you returned a good result. So 300 to 700 words. But again, these aren't hard and fast rules. Okay, this one is kind of a hard and fast rule. Your keyword phrase needs to be the title of your blog post. And the reason this is kind of a hard and fast rule is because what Google does is, or what ActiveRain does, I guess, is when you create the title of your blog post, that becomes the page title of that page. And one of the very first things a search engine looks at to determine what's on a page is the page title. And in fact, everything else kind of revolves around that page title, because when Google lands on a page, they see it's about something specific, and then everything else they expect to see on the page should relate to that phrase or that page title, or in our case, that blog post title. Okay? So, in terms of a keyword phrase for the title of our blog post, we're only going to target one keyword phrase per post. And that keyword phrase is the thing that somebody might search for. Right? And we'll get in, I'll show you guys some real live examples of this, and we'll really start to flush this out. Next week's class will be all about keyword phrases. How do you pick them? How do you figure out what to write about? What are some of the things that people are out there searching for? Okay, but every blog post is going to have a keyword phrase in the title, and you really need to think as you step back and you've written your blog post, is my title something that somebody might search for, right? If you're writing about a particular listing, let's say, you're probably not going to want to title that listing with, you know, charming home in a wonderful community. That might be what it is, but nobody searches like that. People don't search for a charming home in a wonderful community. Right? So as it relates to our keyword phrase, we're almost always going to use geography. And I realize there's some folly in having the word almost next to the word always in caps. But in real estate, people will generally search using some geographic indicator. Okay? And in a lot of search just in general, like think about like retail search, or, you know, people use geography, right? Because they want results that are specific to where they're at. And in real estate, it's obvious, right? Look, people do searches like homes for sale, right? But when they realize like they're getting stuff from everywhere, they'll generally put some kind of a geographic indicator in there. So homes for sale in Seattle, right? Or homes for sale in some real specific area of Seattle. Now we're going to, again, next week we'll really dive into this, but I want to give you an example of, or a couple of examples of geography and subject matter. And the more precise your geography, the less precise your subject matter need be. So think about what are some of the kind of subject matter searches in real estate, right? You've got homes for sale, you've got real estate, condos for sale, houses for sale, townhomes for sale. That's the subject side of the search. In this case, homes for sale. The geography side of the search then is where, right? So in this case, homes for sale in Carriagewood, Renton, where Carriagewood is a subdivision or a real specific place in Renton. So what we did there is, if this was our keyword phrase, we had gotten more specific with our geography, right? We got real precise. Carriagewood, Renton, a very, very specific place in Renton, which means we could be less precise with our geography. Or on the flip side, we might get more precise, we could get less precise with our subject matter. On the flip side, we might get more precise with our subject matter, which would allow us to be less precise with our geography. So in this example, the subject matter component of this keyword phrase is homes for sale with a basement, right? We can be less precise with the geography then, because we've, on that long tail, we've gotten more precise with the subject matter. Again, next week I'm going to give you 500 of these examples, and there's going to be, you'll really walk away understanding this concept of geography and subject matter. Okay, so that's the first one. We're going to pick a keyword phrase for the title of our blog post. Okay, then we're going to repeat that keyword phrase or that title at the start and at the end of our post. You don't necessarily need to put it at the end. Here's why I think it's a good idea to put it at the start and the end, especially as it relates to the end. Okay, when I was in 6th grade or 7th grade or something, I was in English class, and I was a very poor English student up until that time, and my teacher at that was really, really good. I loved her. In fact, looking back all these years, probably all of my writing skills started with that teacher. But when we learned how to write a 5-paragraph essay, right, she told us in the first paragraph you're going to tell us what you're going to tell us about. Then you're going to spend 3 paragraphs telling us about it. Then in the last paragraph you're going to tell us what you just told us about. Right? They're getting so much closer to being like your English teacher as they read your content that it makes sense to start with our keyword phrase. Then we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to end with our keyword phrase. Okay. Now, the reason we put it in the start, and it needs to be somewhere in about the first 2 sentences, is because Google will go into an ActiveRain blog post, and they will pull what's called a page description, and it's the little part that we see in a search result. So as we look at these search results on the page, the portion in blue that's underlined, that's coming from our page title. That's based on the title we give the blog post. The title of this blog post is Riverwatch Condos, Burlington, Vermont. Okay, that becomes the part we can click on. The little green part, that's the URL. On ActiveRain, your blog post URL is based on the keyword phrase or the title that you gave your blog post. And then that first little portion we see there, the page description or the description of what somebody's going to get when they click that link, comes from that first sentence or 2 of your blog post. So you want to get that title or that keyword phrase into that first sentence or 2, and then also at the end. And now if we have it in the beginning and we have it at the end, and our next kind of component of building a good post is to use that keyword phrase 3 to 5 times in the body of the post, then we really only need to get the phrase in there 1 to 3 more times. Does that make sense? It's in there once at the beginning, it's in there once at the end, which means it's in there twice. But in the total blog post, we want to have that keyword phrase in there 3 to 5 times. And it needs to be, those 3 to 5 uses of it need to be exactly as it was in the page title. So in this case, Riverwatch Condos, Burlington, Vermont, right? He wants to have that exact phrase, Riverwatch Condos, Burlington, Vermont, in his post 3 to 5 times. That phrase needs to end up being the most common phrase on the page. So you want to be careful that you're not using some other phrase more frequently or more commonly than you're using your keyword phrase, right? We're trying to get all these signals on the page to point in the same direction. And so if we're using some other phrase more frequently than our keyword phrase, which again is our page title, which is the first thing Google looks at, they're going to come in and look at that page title. Then as they start to crawl the rest of the content, they're going to see other phrases that are more common, and it's going to confuse the search engine. Now, they're not going to be confused, right, because it's Google. They're probably, they don't get confused, but it's not going to be the right alignment of signals that we want to send them. And then one of the reasons why blog posts are so great and why they rank so well in the search engines and why they align so well with Google, and I keep using Google as the example. Look, the same concepts apply to Yahoo or Bing or Ask or any of these other search engines. I just use Google because they're kind of the 800-pound gorilla, right? They send 68% of the traffic to ActiveRain. They send like 65% of the traffic to the greater internet. But one of the reasons blog posts kind of work so well is that when you write something, there's a darn good chance that the body of the content is going to be similar to what your keyword phrases were, right? So if I'm writing about, let's say, a specific condo building, I'm writing about the Riverwatch Condos in Burlington, Vermont, what kind of words and phrases would Google expect to see in a piece of content like that? They'd probably expect to see things like homeowners association. They'd probably expect to see things like parking spaces. They'd probably expect to see things like, you know, common amenities. Just these words and phrases that we're naturally going to use as we write about a condo complex. Right? It makes sense. Like I said, you serve 2 masters, but Google's getting so much closer to actually acting and returning results like a real person would. So using our keyword phrase 3 to 5 times in the body of the post. Again, I'm going to show you a post here in a little while. It's going to kind of pull all of these things together. this is just a reiteration of kind of some of the stuff we talked about when I was talking about 300, 700 words. The reality is, at the end of the day, you need to look at the piece of content that you produce, and you need to figure out, is my piece of content the best piece of content out there? Because Google's goal and their aim at the end of the day is to get their searcher the most relevant, best piece of content for whatever they query. So I would encourage you, after you're done with a piece of content, maybe go Google that thing and look and see what are some of the other pieces of content out there that are similar to yours. What do they have in them that might make them better? And is there room for improvement in the piece of content that you've created? You can always go back. And I asked how many of you guys have been blogging in here. If you guys have been doing this for a little bit, and now you're starting to open your eyes and realize, oh my goodness, like I've been going about this all wrong, and I'm thinking of certain posts I've written where I could change them, and you can absolutely go back and update old pieces of content and put these kind of foundational things in place, and that will give them a chance to rank better in the future. Right? You can absolutely go back to a piece of content and add a paragraph here and there to make it a more in-depth, more well-rounded piece of content. Right? Google will recognize that, acknowledge it, and they will re-rank it accordingly. Let's talk about, so those are kind of the fundamentals, right? We're going to have a keyword phrase. We're going to pick a keyword phrase for each post. We're going to use that keyword phrase 3 to 5 times in the body of the post. We're going to start with it. We're going to end with it. Our post is going to be somewhere in that 300 to 700 range. But you know what? If it's a really technical post about some certain FHA loan program and it needs to be 1,200 words, make it 1,200 words. I always get people to say, I just don't think people read that much on the internet. Let me tell you, if somebody is Googling about like some real particular FHA program, you don't think they want the full gamut of information about that? Absolutely they do. Okay, let's jump into some commonly missed opportunities for SEO. And these are really just, how can we add more of those little signals on the page to get Google understanding that we've got a good piece of content here and all the signals are lining up? The first one is photo metadata. Huh? Like what? Basically, how do you describe your image to the search engine? So I would encourage, and we have these blogging blueprint classes that I'm going to turn you on to in just a minute, but whenever you write a piece of content, you want to have a picture in there. Okay, if you go to any of the big producers of content, right, the Washington Post, the New York Times, CNN.com, ESPN, I don't care where you go, you're going to see every story has an image, right? And part of that is for the user experience. When they land there, we want to have, it draws their attention. It gets them to dive into our piece of content. But from the perspective of when we put our image in our blog post, we need to give it an image description that's similar to the keyword phrase that we used in our post. Okay? It doesn't have to be exactly the same. It doesn't have to be an exact match on that keyword phrase, but it needs to be a signal that aligns, right? So in this case, you can get a pretty good idea that my blog post was probably about like the Plaza del Sol condos for sale in Seattle, a real specific building in Seattle, right? A long tail search term in Seattle. That was the image that I put into a post that was about this, right? It's just one little signal to align with the search engine. An anchor text link using your keyword phrase. So in the 4th class in this series, we're going to really spend an hour talking about this concept and some other kind of concepts related to lead generation. But from an SEO perspective, from a search engine optimization perspective, from the perspective of Google coming in and indexing a piece of content that we've written, you want to have a link in the piece of content that matches the keyword phrase that you used for the blog post. So in my case right here, I hope that you guys can all understand what my post was about, or what the keyword phrase on my post was, right? It was condos for sale in Seattle with 2 parking spots. Like that was my keyword phrase on my blog post. So I needed to have a link somewhere in there that gave them that information. Here's an example of that, right? So anchor text link using your keyword phrase. So my keyword phrase in this case is homes for sale in the Kennydale neighborhood, Renton, Washington. So as you look down in the post, right, in that second paragraph there, I give them a chance to actually find those homes. Here's kind of a concept you want to think about in your blog. And this won't apply to every single post, right? Because some posts have a definitive shelf life. Like if you write a post about home prices in a certain neighborhood, right, it probably applies to like the month you're talking about or the quarter you're talking about or something like that, right? It has a definitive time frame. But a lot of the posts we write, and next week this will really come to life, but like in this case I've written about a particular neighborhood in a particular city, right? Homes for sale in the Kennedale neighborhood of Renton, Washington. A lot of the posts we write, we have the chance to make them what we call evergreen. And what evergreen means is the post is going to be as valid today when we write it as it will be a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, 3 years from now. And what that means is we don't put a bunch of stuff in the post that's time sensitive. So think about this. If somebody did this search, homes for sale in the Kennedale neighborhood of Renton, Washington, sure, they'd want to know a bunch of information about Kennedale, right? They'd want to know why do people live there. They'd want to know what are the houses in this area like. They'd want to know what is this neighborhood like. They'd want to know what amenities are nearby. They might want to know what transportation options are nearby. They might want to know what the schools are like, right? Those are all things that don't change very much, right? A year from now, those things are going to be applicable still. But if they just wanted to find a list of the houses that are for sale right now in that neighborhood, I need to be able to get them to that information in a place that keeps it updated, right? I need to be able to have this link in here that goes back to my website and gives them the currently available properties. And again, in the 4th week of this class, we're really going to just dive into this concept in a ton of depth. From the search engine perspective, when you have that link in there that matches your keyword phrase, what that's telling the search engine is not only is this a piece of content that's going to give you information on that keyword phrase, you are also willing to link out to another place on the internet that has good information about that keyword phrase as well. Right? So that's another signal to the search engine that says, hey, look, here's a good piece of content, but I'm also going to share with the visitor other good pieces of content related to this subject or this keyword phrase. So you need to get an anchor text link using your keyword phrase into your blog post. 8 times out of 10, that's going to be a link back to your website, right? It's going to be a link to a list of homes for sale in your area. It's going to be a link to a market report on your website. It's going to be a link to something on your website. And again, in week 4, we're really going to dive in and hone in on this particular concept. Another kind of missed opportunity for search engine optimization is the idea of additional media-rich content. Right? Embedded videos, so YouTube videos, Google Maps. Right now, Carrie's going to share with you guys a link of how you can create custom Google Maps and embed them into your blogs. Now, these things become kind of the icing on the cake, right? You can get a piece of content to rank without having a YouTube video in there or without having a Google custom map, or without having additional content to download, or without having an embedded form. The reason that these things are good is because when somebody lands on your page, the longer you can keep them on there, the better, right? That's going to be a signal to the search engines that the result they returned was good. So if somebody lands on your post and it's about a particular subdivision in your neighborhood, and you have a video that explains that walks them through the subdivision and talks about this, like, that's going to keep them on the page for longer, right? If you're a lender and you're writing about a particular loan program, and then you've got a video in there of you explaining the loan program, that's going to keep somebody on that page for longer. It has the potential, at least, to keep them on that page for longer. Now, video is a big deal, especially if you're doing it through YouTube, all right? When you create a video on YouTube and you give it a description and you give it a title, and right, Google owns YouTube. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into that piece of code that when Google comes and crawls a page that has a YouTube video on it, there's all this extra info on there. So if my blog post had been about the Plaza del Sol condos in Seattle, and my video, right, from YouTube was about the Plaza del Sol condos in Seattle, there's going to be additional kind of information on that page when a search engine indexes it, letting them know that not only is there good content on this page about that, but there's also a video on this page about that subject matter. Okay, so let's go live and let's kind of look at this thing in progress. And I'm going to show you a lady who, over about the last, now she's only been blogging for about 9 months, but she started blogging based on this series of classes, and then also based on a series of classes that we do called our blogging blueprints. And you guys can go back and watch. Now you got to listen to me. So if you're already, like, if your ears are bleeding at this point from listening to me, I don't know that you want to go back and listen to these blogging blueprints. But basically, I take you through step by step how to create content about some of these different things that I've been touching on a little bit in here, about some of the things that we'll definitely touch on next week. But basically, how do I create pieces of content about certain things? So we've got a blogging blueprint for how do I create content about my listing? How do I create content about a subdivision? How do I create content about a condo complex? How do I create content for a market report? How do I create content on a local business? Or how do I create content on a local event? Right? We've got all these blueprints where we give you a map for how to create these things. So let's go in and look at a lady who, I mean, for me, you guys, she's become my superstar in many ways, and her name's Katrina Benton. And at this point, and she's about 9 months into her blogging efforts, but she's done the things I teach literally to a T, and in some cases even done a better job than I teach. She's generating about 40 to 45 leads a month from her blogs, just from her blogs. Okay? Now she uses Craigslist, and so she was generating about 400 leads a month from Craigslist, but these recent changes to Craigslist have really put a dent in that. Right? She's off like 50% in her Craigslist lead generation. But her blog, which again is something she doesn't have to manage after she's created that one piece of content, right? With Craigslist, every day she's got to go in there and re-up her ads and do new ads, and some mornings she'll wake up and somebody will have gone through and flagged every ad, and all of her stuff will be wiped out and she'll have to start over again. With her blog, when she creates the piece of content, she's kind of done. I mean, in the third week, we'll talk about social and some of the things that you can do to get that thing out there a little bit wider. But this is a piece of content, it's evergreen. It's going to be as good today as it was, and let's see when she wrote it. Back in September when she wrote this thing, right? And it's going to continue to be as good a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. So let's look at the post. So she's got a keyword phrase. Okay, in this case, Hearthstone condos in Anchorage, Alaska. So that's the phrase that she says, look, people are going to search for this. Now, the reality is, so hers was actually Hearthstone condos in Anchorage, Alaska, right? And as we do that search in Google, and I'm actually in incognito mode, and anytime you see me doing searches on Google, I'm always going to be in incognito mode. And the reason I do that is because Google will actually manipulate searches based on your behavior if they know stuff about you. So if I was logged into my Google account, like when I'm not in incognito mode, I'm logged into Google, right? They've got cookies on my browser. I use Chrome, so they know all the stuff that I go and visit. They're going to manipulate the results based on my behavior. But incognito mode allows me to get a real fresh look, kind of, this is what Google would show the person that's not me, right? Just the average person out there. So Hearthstone condos in Anchorage, Alaska. But that's not the only way that she's going to show up, right? Because somebody might have done this search, Hearthstone condos for sale in Anchorage, Alaska. And that doesn't directly match her keyword phrase, but it still returns her as a result, right? Because she has other words and phrases in the body of the post that match up with those things, right? Maybe somebody's looking for a Hearthstone condo with parking. I don't know. I mean, there's lots of just crazy long-tailed ways, right? And none of these searches get done very often, but the cumulative of them all can be pretty substantial. Okay, so Hearthstone condos in Anchorage, Alaska. She's got her keyword phrase in here. Now, she needs to get that keyword phrase somewhere into the beginning of her post again, and she's actually got it in here twice in the beginning, right? Now, these are links back to her website, and again, she uses the anchor text on that link. And if we were to click on this, what we're going to get is the actual, now there's nothing for sale right now in that area, okay? That's just the reality of her market right now, right? Sorry. Like maybe if we were to go to some other one, We might be able to find condos for sale in that market right now. Nope, nothing for sale right now in that market. And that's just, right, she probably has low inventory in her market. But somebody could come off there and do a different search, right? And again, this is stuff that we'll get into in our class, in our fourth class. So she's got her keyword phrase in the beginning. She definitely uses it 3 to 5 times in here. Right? Let's look at some of the, she's got her image in here. When we scroll over the image, Hearthstone condos in Anchorage, Alaska, so the image is aligning, right? That anchor text is aligning. She's got a map down here that's titled Hearthstone condos in Anchorage. Like, it's all just kind of lining up. Right? This is not, I think everybody sitting here, especially if you're a real estate agent, like you could do a post like this about a particular condo complex in your market. You could probably do it tomorrow or today when we got done. Right? And we see all these different types of posts that she's done. I want to kind of show you guys, I mean, she's been blogging pretty heavily, but only since March of 2013. So I'd like to take you in and kind of show you her stats. And any of you guys on your ActiveRain content can get your stats by logging in as you, and I'm logged in as Katrina right now, and going to this stats link right here. So I want to kind of bring you back in her stats, and we're back just a couple of months. Okay, we're now in November. These are posts that she wrote at the end of August and early September. And the column that you really want to pay attention to is this clicks column right here. Because what will happen is every time we load a post, like let's say I was to, or every time somebody loads a post, so this Sahali neighborhood, right now it has 215 clicks. I just loaded that in my browser. And what we'll see is as we come back here, it's going to go from 215 to 216. Oh, 217. Oh, you know what? So someone else, not just me, in the last hour since I loaded these screens up, landed on that Sahali post as well. Here's my one-time landing on it, right? But so this clicks column is what you really want to pay attention to. And what you can see is, look, when you first post a blog, let's look at her most recent entries, just from the last couple of days probably. Well, she hasn't posted anything for a little bit. You're going to see about 100 to 150 clicks on that thing. Some of that will be from other ActiveRain members. You know, some of it will be from consumers, and then it'll kind of stop right in that first day or two. And then over the coming weeks and months, you will start to see these kind of gradual building up of these clicks. And so now we start to see, as we've gone 2 months back, or a little bit more than 2 months back, these posts, the Elderberry Park condos that have 341 posts or clicks. As we get even further back, oops, where's that? As we get even further back to when she first started blogging, now look at what some of these things look like, right? Sometimes you write one and it just doesn't take off. Not as many people are interested in that area as they maybe were in the Brookshire condos. Like, look at this one, 589 clicks it's had on it. The Nickview Estates homes for sale in Chugiak, 1,000 clicks on it. And what starts to happen is if she had only written one post like this, right, she'd get the long tail traffic. Wow, that was a tongue twister, for that one post. But the cumulative approach, where Katrina has said, look, I believe in this. I believe this stuff works. Here's another one, how to buy a foreclosure property in Anchorage, 657 clicks. Right? Here's one that she wrote about a specific HUD program, HUD 184, the Alaska Native American Indian Home Loan Guarantee Program, 944 clicks. Here's one about a Hideaway Lake waterfront home for sale, 800 clicks. How to buy a house with a low down payment in Anchorage, 859 clicks. So what you can see is as these things get older, right, because all these posts are evergreen. If you were to go in and look at each of these posts of hers, when she wrote them 7 months ago, she understood that it made sense to make the post evergreen so that the guy landing on it today still gets good information. You can find her blog at activerain.com/blog/Katrina Benton. This lady is doing some things with her market reports. She's just really doing a good job of covering her market. She started recently to get into this thing where she's writing about homes for sale near all these schools in her market. Right? People search for homes for sale near certain schools. And so she's really honing in on that, and she's covering homes for sale near all these different places. But you can get in and see what Katrina's doing and really get an understanding of how applying these concepts that I talked about, right? Keyword phrase, links back using the keyword phrase, using the keyword phrase 3 to 5 times, having good content, because her posts all look the same. Like when we look at Brookside Manor townhomes or Hearthstone condos, the posts look the same. Like, you know, it's a couple paragraphs, and even as you get into like these paragraphs right here, it looks visually the same. But the content in there is unique, right? This content's unique to the Hearthstone condos. And it's good content. If somebody was really interested in this area, she gives them a pretty good idea of what it's about. Right? And as a search engine comes in here and reads this, she does things like she has good formatting, right? Search engines can tell today, is the post formatted well? It's got good white space. She's got good headers in here, right? She uses sentences. These upscale condos each have an attached and heated garage with space for 2 vehicles. Like, that's a sentence, right? That's not somebody getting in there trying to manipulate and pull in shorthand and, you know, she's taking the time to think about and write something good. Now, think about the content on this page. Does it match her keyword phrase? Absolutely it does. Vaulted ceilings, right? Garage space, attached and heated, fenced private yards, upscale condos. These are all words and phrases that relate to the keyword phrase. And when you write it like this, it's almost impossible not to have those in there, right? But she does a good job. We're gonna see Katrina a bunch more as we go through here, because like I said, for me, in a lot of ways in the last 9 months or 8 months, she's become a poster child for how to do this in a very effective manner at a very high level, where the end game, and her end game is all about lead generation for her business, where the end game is generating leads. Okay, so we're gonna see Katrina more in the coming weeks. That's just an example of kind of this stuff in action and live, and applying it to a business like yours. Okay, so we got some homework. Or I don't know, Carrie would be upset with me. She's always behind the scenes listening in. At this point, when I say homework, she's like, "Oh, you jerk." Action items. These are going to be action items, right? These are some things that we want you guys to do when you get done with the class today. I've got a couple on here, right? Create a list of 3 blog posts you want to write about, right? Write 1 post using what we learned. And then you can use this checklist each time you write a post. And we've got this little checklist. We're going to send out an email, and in that email there's going to be the recording of this class, a link to the recording, and then in that recording there's going to be a way for you to download this checklist and also to download the action items. And so the action items also have in it, like, go set your Google authorship up, right, and give you that link to go set it up. It's going to have write a post. It's going to have your checklist. It's going to have a bunch of things in there that you can kind of take with you to actually start to put this stuff into practice. Here's the deal. If you just sat here and listened to me for an hour and you're never going to do anything with this stuff, like, don't come back. Okay, don't come back next week. Like, you have to start doing something, and there's no better time to do it than when it's like fresh in your head. And hopefully I've gotten you a little bit excited. Like, to see those numbers, to see the amount of clicks Katrina's getting on her blogs, and she hasn't been doing it that long, right? Hopefully that gets you excited. And at some point, I think in week 4, I'm actually going to take you guys into the back end of Katrina's her website, and I'm going to show you how these leads are starting to find their way back, and how she's actually able to track them back to which blog post they were written from. And that's when it starts to get really exciting, right? That's when it's like, oh my goodness, I wrote this post about foreclosures for sale in Anchorage, and it's gotten me 3 leads this month. Like, I need to do a similar post like that for Chugiak, the neighboring town. But you got to get started, right? So each time you write a blog post, we give you this little checklist. So we're going to have Google authorship set up, and that's something that once you do it once, right, that check comes off every time. We're going to pick 1 keyword phrase. We're going to use that keyword phrase in the first 160 characters of the body of the post. We're going to make sure that when we're done with the post, the keyword phrase has been used 3 to 5 times. Here's one thing Katrina's actually not doing, and I talked to her about this the last time I saw her. She's actually overusing her keyword phrase. Hers is in there like 10 times in some instances, and that can actually hurt you. So be careful with the overusage of that keyword phrase. You can use like other similar but different phrases, But just be careful using that exact keyword phrase too many times. Right? Is your keyword phrase the most common phrase? Do you have a proper image description and title? Do you have an anchor text link that includes your keyword phrase? Do you have video that you could be using? Well, get it in there, right? And then share your posts on social media, and that's really going to be kind of the crux of week number 3 and what we talk about in our 3rd class. So what I want you to do is come to facebook.com/ActiveRain, and if you leave your question on our Facebook page, oh, I guess I'm not logged. Oh, I'm in my. If you leave your question on our, if you leave your question on our Facebook page, so you know there's a little box here you can leave just leave it there, and I will come in and answer your questions throughout the day. Gosh, thank you guys. I could talk about this for hours, and so next week we're going to keep talking about it, right? We're going to talk about keyword phrases and what things we want to write about in order to get found by people. We understand how we're going to write them. Now we're going to talk about what to write about next week. I hope you guys can join me. I hope you learned a little bit today. My name is Bob Stewart on behalf of Karen and Michelle, who are always behind the scenes here at ActiveRain University. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Bye-bye, everybody.